Welcome to another episode of Kaleidoscope. Our guest today is Kate Coraccio, the new director of our Westborough Library. And I brought with me an important shirt that says, "We're welcome at the library." And for full disclosure, I am a library trustee, but I'm here to talk to the head of the library about her goals, where she came from, and how life is treating her at the Westborough Library. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and it's so exciting when anyone comes into a new position. But it must have been difficult considering that the previous librarian had been here for so many years and still lives in town. And so those are extra little tweaks that you'll have to make and how you progress here at the library. But you came from a totally different background. So you want to tell us, first of all, let's go way back, because you know I love books. And I still remember the first book that had an effect on me, because I was a very shy, can you believe, a very shy child. And I read a book about a girl who was very shy, who found her voice after reading this book about another little girl. And I still remember the book. So did you have one of those books?
So that's a great question. There's so many great books that affect us at all ages. And I feel like you can find that one like heart book whenever. I think there's still people searching for it. I think for me, the earliest book that I can remember having that impact on me was probably Stregonona. It's just this silly little book about this old Italian grandma who is mystical and magical and has a magic pasta pot and hires this little worker, Big Anthony, to help her out. And he wants her magic pasta pot. He does the spell and he forgets to blow 3 kisses. So the pasta overtakes the city. Oh. And for punishment, Big Anthony has to eat it all. And just this really silly book, but it reminded me so much. I grew up in an Italian household, and it reminded me very much of my grandmother, who would come over and bake with us and cook with us. And so I think at a very young age, connecting with that very funny story and feeling like, it's something that can impact your ability to find joy in reading.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you want that from the youngest age possible, because once you get them hooked on reading, it's just lifetime of joy.
Absolutely. We want, like they say, we want our library kids to turn into library teens, to turn into library adults, library parents, library seniors. We just want them always to be with us.
Yes. So now, what was your journey here? You didn't decide when you were reading about the pasta pot that you wanted to be a librarian. Where did you go first for your career?
So that's actually a funny story. So I would not call myself somebody who grew up in a library, somebody who was bookish at a young age. I enjoyed reading. I liked to read. But I did not grow up as someone who got taken to the library every weekend, and that joy of reading fostered by my family. I think I kind of found it on my own. When I graduated high school and I was heading into college, I wanted to be a history teacher. So I studied history. I was one of the only females in class of all of those classes, and I loved it. And I became a 9th and 12th grade history teacher. I did that for about a year and kind of realized it wasn't for me. I enjoyed the teaching piece of it. But I think teachers have so much on their plate. They're very underappreciated. I think anyone who can be a teacher and do it is a better person than I am. Oh, no. So I did that for about a year, and then started getting my master's in history, as you have to be a teacher, and attended a library session that was required for one of my classes. And that was really the first time that it had dawned on me that being a librarian was a career choice and could be a career path, and a career path which I could keep the teaching portion of it and lose everything else. Little did I know what else I'd be taking on, but decided then to pivot and got my master's in library science and thought I would go into archives and special collection and foster that piece of history as well as teaching. But I ended up getting my first library job at the Marlborough Public Library in circulation and digital media. and just fell in love with public libraries, being able to serve the public. Every day is different, and just really fell in love with it and kind of went from there.
Good. And the skills that you did get in the classroom, you have patrons that sometimes are like cranky little children, and or little cranky children in the children's room that you learn.
Yes,
you have
actual
those skill sets, right? To handle anything. When you mentioned that each time you changed positions and went up the ladder, so to speak, you learned new lessons. And of course, that's between us as teachers. We are always looking for how we can learn something new, how we can improve our cognitive understanding of something or our creative understanding of something. So can you just give a little snippet about, before we settle in on Westborough, what it was like going from different libraries as you moved up the ladder of to the top of the book pile, to what you learned and what was the most difficult? Because I know one of the things that you talked about was working with the challenges of working with municipalities.
Yes.
That you didn't have when you had different constituents to deal with, but
Definitely.
not town government and town influences. So can you give us a little background on that? Because it'll tell us exactly where you're going here.
Yeah. So in terms of my pathway here, so I started in Marlborough. I learned a lot. I started in really doing circulation, doing a lot of their marketing, doing a lot of social media, and I learned a lot that way. I've also worked in Chelmsford, at the Chelmsford Public Library, and there I did community services. I did, again, their marketing, their social media, doing kind of larger scale events for the community, doing a lot of fundraising as well. And since then I've kind of bopped around a little bit as my responsibilities got more. I spent a lot of time at the Morse Institute Library in Natick in various roles there, but there I settled into, I was head of adult services there. They called it Knowledge and Community Services. And I did a lot of adult programming. I ran the department for reference services, information services, outreach services. And that was a really interesting job, only because that's where I was through COVID. And so figuring out how to serve people when everything closed down was a real challenge. And I think libraries in particular didn't have a lot of assistance in figuring out how to do that from anyone other than ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, it's funny, one of the things we ended up doing is creating a walk-up window using one of our old historic windows that people could just walk up and serve them bank teller style, just so that we could get books in people's hands, and pivoting to online services and digital services and building up our digital branches. So that was a really interesting position. I worked at the Worcester Public Libraries as deputy director, so I was one of the deputy directors there in charge of circulation and collections and adult services and outreach services and bookmobiles, so kind of a much bigger position in more of an urban setting, and that was also, I think, a learning curve, and so the challenges there are a little bit different. From there, I really decided that where I fell in love with libraries was in smaller town community libraries, and I really missed the opportunity to work with patrons one-on-one. When I worked in Worcester, I could go months without talking to a patron. And so I really missed that connection that I was able to make in my other positions. So from there, I went to Wilmington as their director, and then after that, I came here to Westborough.
Now, you talked about, when we had our little conversation before this, about the third place and why that means so much to librarians and the idea of a library. So many people don't understand when others say, well, this is one of the third place. So could you give us a little insight into what kind of place that is?
Absolutely. So the concept of a third place is the idea where you spend most of your time. So we know that most people spend most of their time at home and at work. Those are your first two spaces. And then your third place could be anywhere. And our goal as a library is to be that third place for people, the place where they want to go and spend their time and feel accepted and welcome. And I think that we do a really good job of that in Westborough. We want people to come in and use our space and interact with us. I think that libraries are very unique and that they're one of the only places still around where we want you to be in our space and we expect nothing back. There's no expectation of you purchasing anything. There's no expectation of us wanting to rush you out of our chair so that somebody else can take it. We're really there to serve you. And we want you to come in and be there and feel welcome. And so I think that that's where that concept of third space is so important to libraries, and our library in particular. There's also a lot of people who don't have anywhere else to go. Maybe their home is not where they want to be. Maybe it's not a stable place for them to be. And I think having another option where you are not only able to take up space, but you're encouraged to be there. And to read and enjoy and get access to so many things that you may not have access to anywhere else. So libraries are very unique in that, and we're really proud to be able to be that here in Westborough.
Yeah, and it really was my third space when I first moved here. My husband and I moved here from Connecticut, and to be closer to our children. And we knew no one, and I've always was an advocate of libraries, and so the first thing my husband and I did was register to vote and cross the street and got our library cards.
Right.
And then I got interested in the library and I started teaching a writing class there. And that's where I met, having 20 people 3 nights a week, so there were 20 in each class. So I was able to meet 60 people, connect with them quickly because they were writing their memoirs. So they got to know me because I shared my stories and they shared theirs. So that I now have a strong group of people that I know and will say hello to me on the street, so you don't feel so isolated. So the library, and it still is, I love to read, and I read really fast. So I'm there a lot to get a new book. But there's groups that are at risk that we don't always think about. We think about the homeless or the those who have either social or emotional issues. But teens need a safe place, as do seniors. And of course, the little children, I love just having to go downstairs just to walk by and listen to all the giggling and everything downstairs. Yes. I just love that sound. So it is the third place for the town.
Yeah, because we are for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's also unique about libraries, that we are not serving one particular population. We are here for everyone, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of where you come from. We're here to serve everybody in the community and welcome them in.
Now, in our previous conversation, you talked about one of the main things that were a challenge at every job of every library, and it's true in most institutions, were the financial issues facing libraries.
Yes.
But you said that there was also a positive side to that. So either you were crazy optimistic or you really understood how having an obstacle is one of the goals of changing your outlook and changing your perspective and then coming up with a creative solution. So I know you've had some experience in that. So do you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think that libraries in particular are always asked and tasked to do more with less. I think sometimes the work we do is not tangible. People either aren't aware or they really just don't know the scale of the things that we do or what we mean to people who need us. And so, for example, here in Westborough, the library budget is about 1% of the overall municipal budget. So it's a very small number. And most of that is personnel. And so in terms of the budget that we have to play with for municipalities, and this is not unique to Westborough, but we're always having to pull on other sources to make ends meet, right? And part of that is that all of the services that we offer are free of charge. So when you go to a program, or when we do 690 programs a year, we've got to find a way to fund those. A lot of them are homegrown. Our staff are just being very creative, right? In that same sense of how do we offer something? How do I pull from my own talents to offer something? Or who do we have on staff who's really good at X, Y, or Z? Another part of that is being creative about funding sources. So we have an amazing Friends of the Library who help fund almost all of our programming. They help fund and find sponsors for all the museum passes that we offer. We also have a foundation that is raising money towards the library. And so being creative about where we can make ends meet to make sure that we are offering the services that our community needs is so important. I think there's also, like you alluded to, right, the challenge in flexing your brain to figure out how do we solve this in a way that isn't going to impact budget. I think librarians in particular, we're very cognizant of being good stewards of taxpayer money. We want to make sure that every penny we're spending, we are getting a huge return on investment, that our community is getting a huge return on investment, that the value that you're getting out of your investment in your library is felt and has a huge impact on people's lives. So I think there's been a number of times that we've had to really think creatively about a solution, or maybe we don't get the top of the line X, Y, or Z, but you know, we figure out something that's going to work just as good. And I think what helps is that our patrons, our community, they're always willing to jump in and help. We have so many amazing volunteers that give us their time to help us offer the services that we know people want and need.
And one of the, when you were interviewing, you talked, and it really struck me because, again, one of the things I encouraged when I was a teacher and a college professor was how to be creative in a situation which doesn't appear to have any solutions. And your one response was those little wheels at the bottom.
Oh, casters.
Casters,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And how that solved a problem that everyone thought was not solvable. So just briefly tell, because I think that's such an interesting way of how to use your brain. And I do think that a library, because it's nicely structured, you know, you put, I love that when I have a bad day, I want to just go sort books downstairs, or because you have order, you know, and having order all around you amidst the chaos gives you, your brain, that balance of, oh, I've got it, this is a crisis, but oh, I could think of this. And so this was a really interesting solution to a problem you had at another library.
So I think a lot of libraries, not all, a lot of libraries have the same issue we have, which is a square footage problem, right? Where our library consists of 20,000 square feet and we've got to make the most of it. And I've certainly worked at my previous library was 14,000 square feet and they utilized every square inch of that. And one of the ways we did that was making sure that our stacks, our bookshelves, were on casters. And so we could move them out of the way very easily to make space if we had to do a program or if we had to move things around for any number of reasons. I remember in Wilmington we were doing a legislative breakfast and we were inviting all of our legislators in to talk about library issues and funding for libraries at the state level. And we moved, just a couple of us staff, moved the stacks out of the way, put the chairs up, and it was a great use of space. Not only did we fit enough people in that room, because it was packed, but we got to have the event in the middle of the library. And we thought that that was very impactful for our legislators to see our space that our patrons sit in every day and use and fall in love with, that they're actually in the space versus in a meeting room. So yeah, I think something as simple as, you know, let's slap some wheels on it, can impact your ability to provide service in such a deep way.
And also advertising for the building.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
you know, you have to still get the word out of what you're doing. Now you come here and we met at the interview, then you were hired, and then when you walked in the building, what was your first day like?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I think I spent the first few days and few weeks really just getting to know the staff and getting to know the patrons who walk in. I spent a lot of time meeting people where they were, having conversations about challenges and opportunities within the library, what was working, what wasn't working. I think one of the biggest things that we've really had to spend a lot of time on in those first few weeks and just now as well is working on the building repair project and figuring out what was the best way to do these repairs in a way that was going to make sense for the building and also be very fiscally responsible. So that, I think, getting my head around that. I spent a lot of time in those first few days doing that. You know, I think we're really lucky. We have a really amazing staff in Westborough. And so they did a really good job just kind of grabbing me here, let me show you this, let me show you what this problem is. And they don't really present problems without solutions. And I think that's really helpful. They say, you know, here's something that's come up, here's how I want to fix it, what do you think? And then we talk it through and we figure it out. So a lot of time in the early days, I still consider myself in the early days, so I think I'm still doing that. Going out and meeting people, meeting other department heads, meeting community groups. I think my first week, I went down to the farmer's market and worked the desk with our outreach crew and got to meet a ton of people that way. It was a great event. We have a wonderful farmer's market. So, you know, I think it's been a lot of getting to know the community and letting the community get to know me so that we can really assess what we need, what they need, and how we provide it.
Right, because the critical issues are always about what do we do with the building. But I want to focus just for a few minutes on how you orchestrated or worked with your staff in creating the new logos and designs and public awareness for the library.
So the library is heading into, we're actually already in a new strategic planning season. So our strategic plans are required by the state and they last 5 years. So we have just entered into ours, as you know, the library trustees just approved it. And it's just really good practice when you're starting fresh. You've got a new director, you've got a new strategic plan, you've got a new mission, vision, and values, that your logo and your identity reflects that. So I worked with the board of trustees to say, hey, I think we need a new logo. I think we need a fresh look. What do you guys think if we let the staff work on it with me? And you guys are all on board, which is wonderful. And so I worked with the staff to kind of brainstorm what makes sense, what we wanted the look and feel to be, that we wanted it to scream library. We wanted it to tell our mission, and we wanted it to be very clear what it was. So worked with the staff to come up with a few different versions of it, and let the staff vote on what they thought represented our library, the future of the library best. And it was close between two, but the one that I wanted to win won, and I was very happy with that. I would have been happy with any of them. So now we're kind of working on rolling that out. We're still very much in the early days of it, but as time goes on, you'll start to see more and more stuff with the new branding, the new look. You know, our new tagline, which is grow, learn, inspire. And I really think that that speaks to who we are as a library. Growth in terms of personal growth, growth of community, growth of library, growth of resources, growth of knowledge, and then learn, right? Every single thing we do is about learning. Our books are about learning, our programs are about learning, our community interactions are about learning about each other. And then inspire. How do you take that growth and that learning and use it to impact others? And we really felt like that was core to what we were as a library. And so we wanted to make sure that that was in all of our branding and our identity as well.
Well, it's a beautiful logo, and I think it will be inspiring when it's introduced officially into the, after this program will be telecast, you're going to be presenting it at the town meeting in October, which happens in the past. So we're sort of playing the future here, but we hope all goes well. And it was, you know, I know how hard it is as a young mother of a 6-year-old working and on their own, and you know, and starting a new job. So you always have a smile on your face. It may be of panic, who knows?
Like
but it's a welcoming attitude for the library, and you're continuing the legacy of the library being a place of the third place in the community. So I thank you so much for joining us and introducing yourself into the community in such a positive way. It's been delightful.
Well,
so
thank you for having me.
Okay.
This has been great.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.